please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
After starting her career on the stage, alongside her father in the 50s, Jane Fonda was cast in her first movie, Tall Story, in 1959. From then on, the roles came thick and fast, and Jane went on to win the ultimate accolade, the Academy Award for Best Actress for her gritty role in 1971's Klute. The movie was one of the first in a string of paranoid conspiracy thrillers, a genre that became extremely popular in 70s cinema. As a political activist, she has campaigned for multiple causes over the decades.
And protest can change.
But her protests against the Vietnam War in the early 70s caused huge controversy.
The woman in the helmet is Jane Fonda, the actress. She is in Hanoi. Last week, she made a speech on Hanoi radio urging American soldiers to defect to the North Vietnamese.
Years later, the war inspired the Academy Award-winning Coming Home. And bouncing back from the criticism, Jane won her second Best Actress trophy for her performance in the film.
You don't do things thinking this is going to win awards. You do them because they need to be done. The film needed to be made.
She's a long-time feminist, a philanthropist. And who could forget those groundbreaking workout videos which revolutionized the fitness industry in the 80s, selling 17 million copies.
6, 7, 8.
After marrying cable TV pioneer Ted Turner in the early 90s, Jane left the film industry behind.
You miss the acting at all?
Not at all. Oh, are
Really?
you kidding? I'm so happy when I get up, I don't have to worry about how I look.
But she made a triumphant return in the mid-noughties, starring in the box office smash Monster-in-Law.
That you're going to be my
And now, ever moving with the times and almost 60 years on from her screen debut, Jane has fully embraced the streaming revolution, having already shot 4 seasons of acclaimed Netflix original series Grace and Frankie, and she has more projects in the works. I went to meet Jane on her recent trip to London. Jane, it's great to see you.
It's good to see you.
What do you think has been the secret to your longevity? How do you think you've managed to stay on top for so long?
I left the business for 15 years when I married Ted Turner, and then we were married 10 years, then 5 years I wrote my memoirs, and I never intended to go back to acting. But when I finished my memoirs, I thought, maybe I could do it and find joy in it again. And lo and behold, I made a movie called Monster-in-Law, which was the first strategic thing I ever did in my career. I thought, it's a popcorn movie, but it's with Jennifer Lopez, and young people in particular, are gonna go see the movie because of her, but they'll rediscover or discover me because it was a really good part, and the movie was hugely successful, and you know, people really love it, and so that made me think, oh, okay, I could maybe have a career again, and then it kind of went from there.
Jane, can I take you back to the time when you did take that break? It was 15 years, as you said, and you got married to Ted Turner at the time. Why did you stop? You had such a successful career. You'd won 2 Oscars. What made you say, right, I just don't want to continue anymore?
My second marriage to the wonderful Tom Hayden was failing, and I felt, I don't know, maybe it was perimenopause. I didn't quite realize, oh, it could be that. I'm blaming Tom, but it could be that my hormones are changing. But I went down a dark hole. I mean, it was really it was a very sad time for me. And I couldn't, when I feel that way, which is hardly ever, I can't act. I saw no future. I mean, I really, it was pretty rough. And then Ted Turner came sailing into my harbor, Mr. America himself, and kind of swooped me up. And I thought, well, you know, I'm not going to be acting anymore. But as I wrote my memoirs, you know, sometimes doing that, going back and doing what is called a life review, really kind of owning who you are and trying to understand that, gave me back myself. I worked hard. It's not you know, that it just happened. I think you have to be intentional about living, and that's what happened. And I became a different, not a different person, but the me that existed way back when I was a girl kind of came back to me.
Jane, you talked about that very, very dark time when you felt very down. How did you overcome that?
I think everybody has their own ways of dealing with darkness, but I let myself go there. I stayed close to the wall. I was very careful what kind of music I listened to, the kind of movies I saw, the people I was with. There was a moment, I remember, I was sitting alone in my living room, and I was raised an atheist. And I said out loud, if I am feeling this much pain, God must want this to happen. And it was like, who said, who, God? And something happened inside me, and I began to feel a faith, a sense of a spirit that began to enter me in a new sort of way and fill me up. And it saved me in a way.
And when you returned to the industry with, as you were saying, Monsternaut, which was a huge hit, was it hard to come back into the industry? How did it feel coming back in?
Well, by the time I was ready to do it, it felt absolutely great. And Jennifer Lopez was just a hoot to work with. I like her so much. And it's a part that I never could have played before I spent time with Ted. She's just this outrageous, over-the-top character, but 10 years with Ted made me realize that you could be outrageous and still kind of lovable. And so I just let it all hang out.
My son, the brilliant surgeon, is gonna marry a temp.
I need something stronger than this.
It was so much fun. I felt in a way more creative than I ever had before.
And what about the industry itself, Jane? How had it changed since when you had first started?
On all kinds of levels. I mean, for one thing, movies, the movie studios with which I had made a lot of the movies that I produced myself, you know, like Coming Home and China Syndrome and 9 to 5 and On Golden Pond, those were studio movies. But by the time I came back, studios didn't make those kind of movies anymore. They did the big franchise tentpole kind of movies. And so in that sense, it was different. You had to look for independent distribution and everything. And then film, actual film had changed so that lighting could be different. You could, I'll never forget one of the first days of shooting on Monster-in-Law, and my lighting was a tiny strip of fluorescent lights about as big as my middle finger. And I thought, well, that's new. And then I said to Jennifer, where's the director? And she said, oh, he's in Video Village. I said, what's that? I didn't know that now we were shooting digitally and that the director and all the producers were somewhere around the corner under a tent looking at a video camera. And that I could go and look at it too and understand what I did or asked to do it again, you know. So technically it was a very different situation.
Coming up, Jane Fonda talks about the lasting effects of abuse and the treatment of women in Hollywood.
I'm glad it's coming out. Thank God it's coming out. Thank God women are talking, because back in the days we were too scared to talk because we thought no one would ever hire us again.
What about the way that the industry and you know, treating women, in a sense, from when you first started to now? We thought that it had changed, but recently, everything that's coming out, it seems like it hasn't changed. Are you surprised?
No, I'm not surprised. I'm glad it's coming out. Thank God it's coming out. Thank God women are talking, because back in the days, we were too scared to talk because we thought no one would ever hire us again, you know, and the more women are brave enough, and make no mistake, women who come forward and talk about being sexually harassed, abused, or raped, it's very, very, very hard. You don't get anything out of it except fingers being pointed at you, and too often people not believe you. So it's very brave of these women to do it, and it gives courage to other women. I don't think that men realize that when women are taken advantage of sexually, which also means that the man doesn't care who you are or what you are as a human being or how you feel. It's all about you as a sexual object. So it's like you're being completely diminished and become invisible except what you can offer sexually. And it's such an abuse of the soul of a human being, and it takes a long time to recover from it. And that's why also it takes a long time for women to come forward. It's just very difficult. And you know, one always hopes that now it's being talked about more, that it'll happen less.
How would you like it to change things in Hollywood, Jane? How do you think it will? And what do you think would happen, or what should happen to Harvey Weinstein and people like him?
Well, I think they should all go to jail. And, you know, let's put Bill Cosby in there. But the question is not just Hollywood. You know, this is epidemic. This goes on all over the world, in all kinds of levels, and you know, very, very powerful men and not very powerful men. But I think that they have to be put in jail, and I think that the women who come forward have to be applauded, respected, listened to, and gotten help for, because it really has psychological consequences.
Had you ever worked with Harvey yourself?
No. And the few times that I have run into Harvey, he was, you know, he was always, well, first of all, by the time I got to meet him, I was old. If you'll notice, this kind of thing happens to young women who are vulnerable and really can't, well, they can't, it's hard for them to defend themselves. It's hard for them to have agency over the situation. And I was old when I met him, so, but the friends that I know who had this happen by him and by others are usually young and vulnerable.
Jane, from your own experience, you've talked about in your book, My Life So Far, that you had suffered from somebody wanting to sleep with you, and you'd said no, it was a studio boss, and you didn't get the job, or you were fired because of it, and also your own experience of a form of sexual abuse you had talked about. How does that make you feel now, reading about everything that's going on? Does it make you more angry?
Well, you know, about 23 years ago, I lived in Georgia with Ted Turner, and I started an organization called the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Power and Potential, and it was to address the issue of teen pregnancy, which has all kinds of negative effects on the individuals, the child that is born, and society as a whole, because it costs a lot of money, but not to spend too much time on that. In the process, what I began to discover is that younger girls who were pregnant or parenting had 80%, you could be sure they had been sexually abused as children. And so I began to realize that it was epidemic, and I began to study it. And so what I know is that when it happens to a person, it makes it very difficult to trust people in the future. It invariably makes the young person feel that it's their fault. I must have said no the wrong way, or I didn't fight hard enough, or I must have asked for it, or, you know, because young kids can never blame the adult upon whom they you know, rely. It's always my fault. And so they spend a lot of their lives, unless they get the proper help, with guilt.
These initiatives are so important to you, Jane, and helping young people, and the women's media that you've co-founded too. Is it because of your own experiences that you had gone through?
As an activist, you're the most effective when you are bringing what you carry in your gut and in your heart to the issue. That's when you have real passion that can help other people. You know, to move away from the issue of sexual abuse and harassment into the issue of the absence of women's voices in Media. Do you know that only 3% of the decision-making jobs in the media in the United States are held by women? So whereas women are the face on TV very often,
up there
it's the guys upstairs that make the decision about what stories you're going to do and how you edit them and so forth.
Disease to please, have you overcome that? Because you talk about that, don't you?
Right. The disease to please is what happens when parents tell you you're too fat or you're too this or you're too that, but it's also what happens when you're sexually abused. I'd lie if I said I'm 100% over it. I grew up in the 50s, so looking good and staying trim is still, but it's to please me more now. You know, I don't really give a fuzzy rat's ass about what men think of me anymore. But I want to feel good about myself.
Still ahead, FONDA on politics, and she doesn't hold back when it comes to the US president.
Trump is the absolute worst person we could have in office right now. It's just too volatile.
When the presidential campaign was happening, you spoke out against Trump, and you actually did say that that was not the America that you wanted and that you felt ashamed. How do you feel now about President Trump?
Before the election, when I said those things, I never in my wildest dreams imagined that he would actually become president. When he did, the first thing that happened, and I think it happened to just about everybody across the board, I felt something in my body that I had never felt before. It was, first of all, I felt like I was living in a dream. This can't be real. And at the same time, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. This is unlike anything that has ever happened before. I mean, inept and bad people have been elected to office in the United States before. And we could say to each other, well, this is really bad, but you know, we can work hard during these 4 years and we'll come out the other side and we'll change things. That's not the way it is anymore because of climate. The climate crisis that we're facing means there's no window, we have no wiggle room to make mistakes. Everything good that ever happened in our country happened through struggle. It never, ever, ever happens by us just sitting back and letting the politicians do their thing, no matter how good they are. There are so many people in the middle of our country, in the United States, that are in such deep pain and are so scared and don't know who they are anymore because everything that gave them an identity, their jobs, union jobs in factories where they could bring home a salary to support a family and pay for a home, those are gone. And there's no institutions anymore that they can look to for identity. That's why the NRA, the National Rifle Association, is so successful. They give people an identity. We have to change that. We have to create new institutions for these people that can make them feel like human beings that are seen and respected again. You know, there are so many people that voted for Trump that voted for Obama for 2 elections. They're beginning to regret it in large numbers. So people, organizations have to step into that breach and fill in that vacuum that exists. I think it can be done, but we have to be extremely, vigilant now and just, I work now to support my activism. Yeah. That's what I'm doing.
Your activism, of course, Jane, you're very famous for that during the Vietnam War when you were campaigning against it. What advice would you give to activists now if they're worried, there's North Korea and a war of words with the US now?
What words of wisdom? It's the politicians. It's Trump. It's people who understand that diplomacy, negotiations, diplomacy, it has worked up until now. We have not had a new nuclear war. You don't taunt and go nah at somebody like the president of North Korea. You work diplomacy, and Trump is the absolute worst person we could have in office right now. It's just too volatile and dangerous, and I'm hoping that the investigation will get him, frankly. They have so much material, and I hope he doesn't last 4 years. I mean, that's a terrible thing to say, except that he's going to bring us down.
President Fonda has a good ring to it?
I don't even want to direct a movie, much less, I mean, when I think people who want to be president are crazy. What a terrible job. Never, ever, ever, no. But no. Everybody says, well, you're strong, you should be a director. No, when the day is ended, I want to go home and get in a hot bath with a martini.
I am a private person.
Oh, you are the least private person in the world. First time I met you, you pulled up your shirt and said, do these things look right to you? Look,
You've become a face now for the culture of the older woman through Grace and Frankie, the very successful series for Netflix. How important do you feel being that role model is and an icon to generations of women?
Well, you know, you wake up every day and you go to the bathroom and you fart, and brush your teeth. You do all the things that you always did, and nobody quite feels like an icon. That said, I'd be lying if I said it doesn't feel good to be someone who gives older women a sense of hope. And I mean, I get, because I'm active on social media, I get a lot of input from people, from women of all ages and on the street, and so does, you know, so does my pal Lily. Women saying to us, you give us hope. There's a future beyond age 50 that we can look forward to.
You're coming up to your 80th birthday. What's the next chapter in your life?
I have no idea. I don't know. I never had a very long bucket list, and everything on my bucket list I've done. I've walked Machu Picchu on the Inca Trail. I've gone to places that I've always wanted to go. But I want to write another book. I want to stay healthy. And I think when you're old that it's really important to think a lot about dying. We don't live as well if we don't. Let's just say you die in bed the way we all would like to. What do I want? I want to be surrounded by people who love me. I want my children and grandchildren to be there holding my hand and loving me. Okay, so if that's what I want to work for, I have to earn that. So it means between now and then, I have to be sure that they do love me, you know. And I haven't always been all such a great parent, you know, so I have to, it's never too late to make up for that. And so that's the main thing kind of that I'm working on, besides all those political and social things.
You've just got the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Venice Film Festival. You're in your 4th season of Grace and Frankie. You've just come out with a film with Robert Redford. Could you ever imagine that you would be this busy at this stage in your life?
Never, no. I didn't think I'd ever live this long, number one, and number two, I never imagined that at my almost 80, a month or so away, that I would be working this much. And I feel blessed. I'm very, very grateful, and want to try to make the most of it. When I was in my 40s, I was very scared of getting old. And so whenever I'm scared about something, I kind of become its best friend. I just put my arms around it and strangle it to death. But I usually write a book about it because that forces me to study. So I wrote a book called Women Coming of Age because I wanted to understand aging. And one of the things I said in that book is before I die, I want to give a cultural face to older women. And then when I left the business, I thought, well, that'll never happen. But now, oh my gosh, we're really doing it. Me and Lily Tomlin in Grace and Frankie, and with Bob Redford in Our Souls at Night, showing that older women can still, you know, we may be over the hill, but there's all these other hills after that hill that nobody ever tells us about, and beautiful meadows, and you know, it's just very exciting, and I think that it's giving women hope. That's what they tell me anyway.
Jane Fonda, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a great pleasure.
Pleasure to see you.
Here we go.